Hey guys, in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on something I haven't really done at all up until this point, and that is the major pentatonic scale. I'm going to be showing you some of the key patterns and positions that you definitely have to know for the major pentatonic scale, and how to connect these patterns all over the neck to kind of give you real command out of this sound. And also how you can kind of introduce some nice little bluesy sounds with this scale just by kind of doing some nice little greasy bends and slides. Also, there is a link in the video description below for you to come and get the free tab on this lesson. So make sure you come and get that. Let's jump into it. All right, so all the major pentatonic patterns that I'm going to be showing you today are going to be in the key of E. And we're mostly going to be focusing on patterns that kind of move horizontally. And then we're going to do some work connecting those patterns. But I will probably show you a couple of vertical patterns as well. And we're going to be getting started here in the open E position right down here where our E chord is. And we're going to start right there with the open E string. There's your second, major third, fifth, sixth, and the root again. All right. Now, one thing I like to do, and you hear a lot of people do when playing these major pentatonic patterns, is do a slide between your second and your major third. So if I were going to do that in this position, I would probably do that with my third finger. And the same on the way down. Again. Okay, so that is the open position. Now, of course, if you were going to move that to another key, say G, okay, you'd be like, the same pattern would look like this. All right, or C. All right, so that is what that pattern is going to look like anytime you have the root down on the low E string, moving horizontally up the neck. Okay, next let's take a look at the pattern that has your root on the D string. Okay, so here's our E note at the second fret on the D string. And again, I'm going to focus on this horizontal pattern. There it is. Again, I can slide that between my second and major third. And there it is. Okay, now let's take a look at a pattern that has the root on the A string. Okay, here it looks exactly like the pattern that you had on the low E string. All right? And you can do it again with the slides. And that's your root on the A string. Okay, now one kind of in between here would have that root on the A string as well, but do more of a vertical pattern. So kind of based out of the C-shaped chord right here of your E chord. Okay, so we've covered a lot already. The low E string, the D string root, the A string root moving vertically, and the A string root moving horizontally. Next, let's take a look if your root was on the G string. Okay, so here's our E note on the G string. Right here. Root, second, major third, fifth, sixth root. And again, I like to do the slide. Now, normally in this pattern, you might choose to use the second finger for your slide, because that sets you up to play the next note in the scale, that B note, your fifth, with your first finger. Okay, so if you were doing this with your third finger, it kind of puts you out of position. Okay, so I really recommend you do this slide if you're going to slide between the second and your major third with the second finger. And one more pattern I'll show you here would be if the root was on the B string. But we ran out of notes here if we want to catch the octave. You'd have to take a leap up there. Now, as I mentioned before, in this lesson, I'm mostly focusing on patterns that kind of move horizontally, and we're going to connect those. Okay, but you should also learn more vertical patterns. Now, we did this one earlier, kind of like in a box position there, one finger per fret. Now, you could also play those same notes out of this position and that shape. And there are several of these examples around the neck. Now what I'm going to do is show you some ways you can kind of squeeze some bluesy sounds out of this major pentatonic sound by introducing the flat third and flat seven. The major pentatonic scale in itself is not a very bluesy sounding scale at all. Very major sounding. But if we want to get some bluesy kind of little greasiness with this sound, we can do it by introducing the flat third and flat seven. And the great thing is we don't really have to think of an entirely different scale or different patterns even. We're just going to put a little bit of slide grease or bending grease on some of these notes. And you're going to be able to kind of get these sounds out of the same patterns that we just learned. All right, now let's use the example that has the root on the D string, that kind of horizontally moving pattern right there. All right, there was our pattern. Now, first thing I want you to do is find the second and the sixth of that scale, right? So the second, right, just a whole step above our root, and the sixth, right up here, that C sharp note. Second and sixth. Learn where those are within this pattern. Sixth, second, root. Okay, so what we can do here is introduce little slides or little bends to kind of give us some bluesy sounds with these notes. Now, usually with the second, what I will do is slide down from the flat third, which is always just going to be a half step above there. You can do that. All right, do something like that. Just slide down to that second from a half step above from the flat third, and you're just touching on it. You're just touching on it really briefly, getting back down to your second, okay, and then a lot of times going back to the root there. That's one way you could do it. I could also do this with bends, so I could bend it up just a little bit, right? Little half step or even a quarter step bend, and there you have it. Okay, now let's do the same thing with the sixth. The sixth, we want to get that bluesy sound by kind of introducing the flat seven, which would be, again, a half step above. So we can slide up to that note or slide down from it. So there's a little example there, just kind of going from that sixth, sliding up just real quickly to the flat seven, the D note, and coming right back. Okay, then I might go to a different note in the scale, say like the B note. All right, and just by doing that, we've kind of bluesed it up quite a bit. Okay, and again, you could also do this as a bend. Again, don't overbend it, it's just kind of a half step. And there you have it. Now that's where those notes would be out of this pattern, with the root on the D string kind of moving horizontally. But you need to find this stuff out of every one of these major pentatonic patterns. So let's take, say, the one here that we did more the vertical pattern. Find the second and the sixth again. There's your second, the F sharp note. And again, you can either slide up to that flat third or slide down from the flat third to the second. Do something like that. Slide up from the second to the flat third, just touching on it for just a brief second, and that gets you that nice little bluesy flavor. And I might go up the scale. Same thing with a bend. You could pull that second down a little bit. You just got to try different things. It's all trial and error. Did a little bend. And on the way down, I did that slide from the flat third down to the second. All right? But the overall pattern really hasn't changed. Okay, again, find the sixth. Right there, there's our C sharp note. slide up to that flat 7, bend, and there you have it. You can get a lot of nice bluesy sounds out of this. Let's do one more here. Say the pattern that had our root on the G string. So just to remind you, this was the pattern. All right, again, find the second, find the sixth. There's our second, little bend here. Again, we're just kind of touching on the flat third. All right, the sixth. Again, we're going to touch a little bit on that flat 7 by either using a slide or a bend. And there you have it. But the overall pattern is basically unchanged. Just remember where these notes are and use the adjacent notes. For in the case of the second, the flat third. In the case of the sixth, the flat 7. Okay, now when you're going to use it, you know, where you're going to use this really depends on the overall vibe of the song. If it's a really major sounding kind of tune, I'm probably not going to introduce these notes. You know, I'm going to stick with more a major, very major sound, or maybe introduce the major 7 instead of the flat 7. But if it's kind of a bluesy sounding tune, a rootsy sounding tune, you can certainly throw that stuff in there and it's going to make it sound great. All right, so once you've learned the individual patterns here, kind of the 1-octave patterns, what you want to be able to do here is kind of link those together. So let's take some examples here. So let's say we're playing the first position right down here, based out of the open E. That was that kind of first pattern that we did. And I kind of went up to the octave of that E, right? Now that we can start over and play that pattern that moves horizontally up with that pattern based on the root on the D string. So now we have a 2-octave pattern. And I would also practice that with those kind of slides in between the second and major third. Now, one thing to notice here is most of the time when I'm playing up in this pattern, and if I'm going to go to the octave here of that E and continue playing above that, usually what I'm going to do is switch over to the second finger here and go to the root. And then with my index finger, and that'll allow me to kind of do some bends and stuff up here out of the next pattern. All right, so kind of get used to playing that C sharp there with your second finger. Now we're set up to connect this pattern with that pattern that has the root right there on the B string. Now we've got 3 octaves. And then make sure you can do this in reverse. And again, if I'm going to use those slides, usually I'm going to do those with the third finger, even descending. Okay, so what if I were going to do the pattern here with the root on the A string moving horizontally? That now connects with that pattern that has the root on the G string. And if you've also done the work locating those seconds and sixths and kind of introducing the flat third and flat 7, now you can really get some great sounds out of the scale and utilize the entire neck. Here I'll kind of demonstrate that. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, guys. This is a really great sound once you get under your fingers. Make sure you kind of practice these patterns in isolation, know where the roots are, and then kind of link them together, and then go ahead and add in that little bluesiness with the flat 7 and flat 3rd. If you did learn something in the video and want to support the channel, I would very much appreciate that. I have a link in the description below for my Patreon page, my TrueFire lessons, and also my membership. So check that out. And also, I appreciate it if you like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.